Hello and welcome to another episode of Latitude. Afghanistan is going to witness dramatic changes in 2015 with the withdrawal of the bulk of US and NATO forces, and with the new government in place in Afghanistan, which has already begun to strengthen its relations with China and Pakistan. President Ashraf Ghani of Afghanistan was in New Delhi earlier this week to try and see and recalibrate Afghanistan's relations with India.
It came after his visit to China and Pakistan. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani's recent trip to New Delhi, sending a clear signal on where India stands in its priorities. But in contrast to the policy and India's refusal to send arms to Kabul, Ashraf Ghani has turned towards Pakistan to battle the Taliban menace and to China for investments. Even with Russia and Iran not far behind, Kabul could become the new theatre of geopolitical rivalry as Delhi remains in a standby mode in the hope of regaining the ground it has lost due to its limitations.
There are many players now clearly in Afghanistan, and New Delhi, having been a rather active participant in Afghanistan, is now possibly on a standby mode, waiting and watching to see events unfold. What is the future of Afghanistan? To discuss that, we have two eminent guests. Ambassador Jayant Prasad, who was India's envoy in Afghanistan until 2010, and General Ashok Mehta, who is heading currently an India-Afghanistan policy group and looking at events in Afghanistan from 2014-15 onwards. Ambassador Jayant Prasad, sir, my first question. India has made huge investments in Afghanistan. Are we now going to pull back and wait and watch Afghanistan go back into the past, as it were?
There is no question of a pullback from India or a climb down from India. We will remain as engaged in Afghanistan as the Afghan people and government desire us to remain. And you see, just before President Ashraf Ghani landed in Delhi, 3 of our helicopters manufactured in India were delivered to him. This was in response to a repeated request from him to have these delivered. It was a promise that was made earlier. And there was a lot of talk in the Pakistani media in particular that President Ghani is not going to ask for any Indian military equipment, but that's certainly not true.
I'll come back to the military equipment aspect a bit later. General Mehta, sir, there's a lot of effort made by India to put Afghanistan back on its feet. Ambassador was probably part of that initiative. But how do you see Afghanistan? Do you see Afghanistan being able to cope with its challenges with the kind of financial investment Afghanistan requires, and Barack Obama having failed to get an international guarantee to give Afghanistan the kind of money it needs, about $5 billion a year? So how is Afghanistan going to cope with the financial requirement to meet its challenges?
Well, I think the principal requirement for Afghanistan today is to keep the Afghan national security forces on its feet. Now, because that is the security paradigm which underlines the transition and the transformation that is taking place in Afghanistan. And the financial commitment that you talk about, as far as I know, the Americans have made a commitment for the ANSF to the tune of $4.9 billion annually till 2016. Now, whether this will get extended or what will happen to this, will they downsize the Afghan National Security Forces? We don't know. But given the current situation, the ground situation, given what President Ghani is doing, in other words, looking towards Pakistan more decisively, because he says that he has realized, like others, that Pakistan is the key player. Without Pakistan's help, what he calls the armed opposition, the Taliban who enjoy sanctuaries inside Pakistan, will not come out for the peace and reconciliation process.
So, Ambassador Prasad, Pakistan. Clearly, Pakistan figures again and again on the radar screen as far as Afghanistan is concerned. 3 quick points. One is, Pakistan may be seen politely as a key player, but it's really the real troublemaker in Afghanistan. Secondly, Pakistan has continued to support the Taliban, first to unsettle American troops, now to contest the Afghan National Army, which is battling against the Taliban. And the Afghan president sees Pakistan finally as somebody which he may collaborate with to finally take control of the security situation. But simultaneously, there's the other aspect about the arms that India was repeatedly asked to supply by Afghanistan, and what Afghanistan has finally got is only 3 helicopters. Afghanistan's wish list was much, much longer.
You know, India cannot be placed in this strange position of suddenly supplying the wherewithal of the Afghan National Army when the war in Afghanistan was not being fought by India. It was being fought by United States, assisted by 48 other countries that were members of the International Security Assistance Force. Why President Karzai asked India for a military package was partly to shame his alliance partners into giving Afghanistan what they require, because this is a strange army without enablers, without medevac, without artillery, without the components that make up an army. And Afghanistan is asked to do today something which is impossible, because the ANSF, with 149,000 foreign forces, of which 100,000 were American, with 350,000 ANA and Afghan National Police, there were 500,000 men under arms maroof at the end of 2010. That's the year I left Afghanistan. And they remained there for another year and a half. And they couldn't deal with a bunch of 30,000 Taliban. How do you expect the present Afghan government to cope with them without adequate food, fuel, and firepower, without the financial muscle which is required to economic development? But security trumps all 3.
Afghanistan's biggest challenge currently, to my mind, is to really see through the bluff of Pakistan. But President Ghani has chosen to do otherwise. He has, in his infinite wisdom, decided that Pakistan can actually stabilize Afghanistan in as much as what the world saw Pakistan and its obsession for dominating Afghanistan as being the key destabilizing factor. What's your take?
Well, you know, Pakistan, everybody has said from day one, is part of the problem. Pakistan now wants to become part of the solution. And that solution lies, either you defeat, one way of doing that is, as far as Afghanistan is concerned, to be able to defeat the Taliban. The other is to accommodate the Taliban, the armed opposition, into the present national unity government. Now, of these 2 options, the first option about being able to militarily defeat the Taliban, obviously that is not feasible. Ghani's, obviously, if he can't use the military solution, then the Taliban will try to see if they can militarily conquer the Afghan National Security Forces. And I think that is also not possible, because so far not a single inch of ground has been lost by the ANSF. They may have suffered very heavy casualties, but no territory, no real estate, as people had feared that parts of the south and the east of Afghanistan would fall and crumble and the Taliban would take over. That has not happened.
Ambassador Prasad, so there is a point which is repeatedly made by a lot of commentators. One is about the fact that, you know, Taliban is an independent entity or not. There is that big question, but very clearly to me, it is a proxy of the Pakistan military. But more importantly, we were able to get
I agree with you. I don't have to give you a long answer on this because you are absolutely right. Development in Afghanistan is going to suffer. President Ghani came and bravely said in his address at the Indian Council for World Affairs that in 15 years' time, Afghanistan will become the world's #1 producer of iron ore, the world's #1 producer of copper, a major player in gold, and a major player in rare earths, of which it has 14 of the 17 known rare earths that are required commercially all over the world. But if Afghanistan remains in its current state, because 2014 was the bloodiest year after 2009, and 2015, the first quarter results show that 2015 we are going to be in a more troubled state militarily. So with all this pressure working on the from within Afghanistan, to conceive that development can gallop forward will be a pipe dream.
Right. A lot of interesting points there, but we'll be back after a break to look at why is Afghanistan still attractive to so many countries, and what is going to be the stake of India, Pakistan, China, and not to forget Russia, Iran, and the United States, which has made a huge investment in Afghanistan.